I heard a story about this elderly couple that they'd been married for 60 years, and they were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary on that day. They were sitting in a swing. They had gone to this really beautiful state park, and there was this wonderful lake and a swing, and they were sitting in the swing. And as the elderly husband had his arm around his wife, and he said to her, "Honey, you know, our love is tried and true." And his wife was kind of hard of hearing, and she said, "I'm sorry, hon, but you're going to have to speak up. I didn't quite catch what you said." And he said, "I said our love is tried and true." And she says, I'm sorry, but could you just say it a little louder?" And so he's a little aggravated, so he very forcefully says, "Honey, our love is tried and true." And she sat there and looked for just a moment, and she says, "Well, I'll tell you, I'm tired of you too." So sometimes longevity is the key of not only love, but tolerance and patience as well. I want to talk to you today for just a little while about the battle that is taking place inside all of us. And it is the battle of the flesh against the spirit. The flesh is our natural carnal desires. It is just the things that we're born with. The other day I was in Kroger, and as I was shopping, there was a cart that passed me, and he had this lady that looked like in her 20s or so, and she had a little 2-year-old that was with her. And she stopped by the cereal aisle, and as she was looking for a certain cereal, the little boy just kind of reached over. You know, everything is just right at his level, and he picked up a box of cereal and set it in the seat with him. Well, as they moved on down the aisle, I wanted to kind of see what was happening. And so as they moved on down the aisle, the mother noticed the box of cereal, and she told the little boy, "Honey, we're going to have to put it back." And so she took that cereal and put it back on the shelf. And he began to cry and to kick and to carry on, and got real red-faced and just pitched an utter fit. As a matter of fact, this was a very large Kroger, and I was on the other side of the store in a little while, and I could still hear him crying and carrying on. Moms, have you ever been in that situation? Yeah, you know, they can pitch a fit. Now, the point that I'm making is nobody has to teach that child to do that. Isn't that right? If you're not acquainted with that, or you maybe as a parent, your children are older as ours, and you kind of forget about those things, and then you get reacquainted with it with grandkids. Nobody has to teach a child to be self-centered. Nobody has to teach a child to be short-tempered. Nobody has to teach a child to throw a fit, and that's, I guess, what I call that carnal nature, that flesh, is what the Scripture calls it. Things like pride and selfishness and impatience and getting upset over things. And kind of here's the key to this, and that is the flesh, that natural desires that we have, that flesh part of us wants its own way. The flesh is not going to be happy unless it gets its way. And the easy way is to just be like that little boy, just give in and want what you want. And you know, that's okay if you're 2 years old. You know, when you're 2 years old and you pitch a fit, or you're 2 years old and you're intolerant, or you're 2 years old and you're not very patient, you're 2 years old and you're critical about things, people understand that. You know, you're growing, you're developing, you're trying to get a handle on the world. But when you're 42 years old and you're still pitching those fits, then there's something that needs to be addressed in your life. And if you're still being ruled by those feelings, then there's going to be issues in your life that you're going to have a problem. See, we think that I just feel like being rude to that person because they were rude to me, so I'm going to tell them off. Or I feel like being lazy today, so I'm just going to skip work. Or I feel like being impatient with an individual, and so I'm going to get real testy with them, and through my body language I'm going to shift and move and show my impatience. Or I feel like compromising my moral standards, so I'm going to do that. See, that's the flesh part of us that's wanting to do those things. And the flesh is really loud and boisterous about these things. The flesh wants what the flesh wants. And the key takeaway is, as long as you allow your feelings to be the boss, it is going to limit you. Now, I want you to listen to me. As long as you allow your feelings to be the boss, it will limit you with how far you can go in your spiritual maturity. And another thing, it's going to limit how willing God is to share His blessings with you. Just like with children, we generally give blessings to children as they become age and developmentally appropriate. You don't give 5-year-olds Mustangs. They gotta, if he's 17 and he's still acting like a 5-year-old, he generally doesn't get a Mustang. And the same thing is true with God. God does not give mature blessings to immature Christians. Just as we don't. Just because a 6-year-old asks for a hunting rifle, that doesn't mean he's going to get it. There are proper times of maturity and proper channels that have to be gone through. And God is the same way. As long as we allow those feelings, and the feelings are going to be there. I can get the feeling of impatience just like a 2-year-old can. I can get the feeling of anger that a 2-year-old can get, but it's how I react that is going to determine how far I'm going to go in my maturity, and also how willing God is to give me His blessings into my life. And if you live on that shallow level of always having to please the flesh, that is, having to please your feelings, you will never discover what is really in you, the best of you, your gifts, your talents, your potential. Those things just will not come out. And for this reason, the Apostle Paul says in Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 19, now, the deeds of the flesh are evident. When he says they're evident, that means they're there and they come out, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, adultery, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousies, outbursts of angers, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I've warned you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. You remember Jesus said that the line on the right in Matthew 25, He says, come ye into the blessed and receive the things that have been prepared for you. There's blessings that are prepared for you. But Paul says in Galatians 5 that if I let these feelings, and if you look at these sins that are mentioned here, the feelings of compromise, immorality, impurity, sensuality, the feelings of envy, the feelings of strife, the feelings of anger, the feelings of jealousy. He says, you're not going to, if you allow those things to rule your life, you're not going to inherit the blessings of the Lord. Now, he's writing to Christians. He's not writing to people out in the world. He is writing to Christians, and he is saying that you have to learn to grow up. And you have to get beyond this surface. And if you can get past the pain of not having it your way. See, my way says, if I don't get my way, I'm going to get angry. If I don't get my way, I'm going to be critical, and I'm going to let you know about it. I may go along with you, but I'm sure going to let you know I'm not happy. You see, if I can't get beyond living in the shallows of that kind of lifestyle, then I'll never, ever reach the potential of what I could be for the Lord and the people that are around me. Now, think about it for just a moment, the benefits of what I call a disciplined life. Too many people live on that surface level of letting their feelings, of letting their emotions run their life. The problem is our feelings will lead us down a path that we don't want to know and we don't need to go. In the just mundane, everyday events of life, who will be happier in this situation? Say a traffic jam, the person who is patient or the person who is impatient, and the situation calls for stress. What about in a situation of dealing with people problems? The one who is gentle and in self-control, or the one who is out of control and is angry? Who is going to reap the benefits of overcoming problems and issues in life? The one who is peaceful and faithful, or the one who has no peace and easily loses their faith? You see, trying to develop a strong relationship, whether it be in marriage, whether it be in the home, whether it be with a friend, is that it takes somebody who can control the feelings of the self. Those feelings of flesh that we're talking about, passions and desires, are someone who has or his flesh in check. A happy life. How are you going to have a happy life? A person who is satisfied with what God has blessed them with, or one who is envious and bitter? You see, when we start talking about the benefits of a disciplined life, there is a big difference. The flesh will tell you that I want to be rude to you because I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get my way, or things didn't go the way that I wanted to. And so I want to be rude back, and I want to have the last words. Feelings will tell you, I want another piece of pie, and don't make me wait. I'm hungry. But if you listen, the Spirit tells you those 6 pieces you've already had is enough. You don't need any more. And so you see, you got to listen to the small voices that are going on in your life, because the voice of the flesh will tell you, I want to be comfortable no matter what. But when we live a disciplined life and we discipline ourselves to do the right thing, now I'm going to tell you, it's going to be harder. And the harder it is, the more we are growing in our life. Now, rather than looking at the pain, turn around and look at the fact that, you know, whenever it's hard and I have to bite my tongue, or when somebody is going to make me angry, but, you know, I'm not going to let them make me angry. And it's difficult not to let them angry. Know that I'm growing. You see, growth, there's pain. You remember as a child, and some of you as children, you probably have experienced this as well, that we have what are called growth pains. You remember those? Okay, maturing spiritually, I have growth pains as well. The Hebrew writer says in Hebrews chapter 12 in verse 11 that no discipline at the time seems pleasant, but later on it will produce a great harvest. Now, do you understand the significance of living a disciplined life? We need to think about the later on rather than the here and now. That's what the Hebrew writer is talking about. Being disciplined is not looking at the now, but being disciplined is looking at the later on. And this morning, let me urge you, you know, when feelings want to tell you that we want to do this right now, a person who is mature and is growing mature and is maturing will not allow the emotions of the moment to step in, but they will think about the later on. You know, you look in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 19. Just think about this. He says, and let's look there in 5 and verse 19. He said the deeds of the flesh are this: immorality, that's now. But what about later on? Impurity and sensuality, that's now. But what about later on? Idolatry, now. But what about later on? What about sorcery? Now. But what about later on? Enmities and strife and jealousy and outbursts of anger and disputes and dissensions and fractions and envyings and drunkenness. All these things here. You can see these that the flesh says, let's do them now. But what about later on? What about later on? What kind of dividends are going to be paid later on when I have sown these things? Paul says in Galatians chapter 6 that whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. That is just the law of sowing and reaping. Now, when you sow envy and you sow strife and you sow a lack of control and you sow outburst of anger, that's the now. But what are you going to receive in the harvest, the later on? See, that's what's going to count. That's why the Hebrew writer said in Hebrews 12, verse 11, that discipline right now seems to be hard, but it will reap the blessed benefits in the harvest. You see, the harvest is going to be greater. And the only way that we can overcome the feelings of now is to remember about the later on. Now, only you can make the decision to live a disciplined life. Your feelings will tell you what you want, but that does not mean that's what's best for you. The flesh and the spirit. Remember, he talked about the flesh. He goes on and he says in verse 22, but the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. Against such things there is no law. He says, if we sow those things, that there's going to be a different later on. The flesh and the spirit are constantly at odds, but you get to choose who's going to be the boss of your life. One time I had a friend that had this little blonde-headed girl, a lot like Cora back there. She was a little bit older than Cora, but she was so funny. He would get on to her, and she would look at him and just smile and say, "You're not the boss." It was so funny. You're not the boss. Some of you, I know, you've had children in situations to where they kind of feel like, well, you're not really the boss. But let me tell you, your feelings want to be your boss. See, anger wants to say, you're not the boss, I am. Strife wants to say, you're not the boss, I am. Who's the boss in your life? Well, see, that's going to be evident. What did he say? These things are going to be evident. And notice when you do the right thing, and when it's hard, you sow to the Spirit, you're going to get and reap the blessings and the favor and the increase that comes. And it may not be easy, but yet that's what we need to do. The book of Romans talks about those who follow the dictates of the flesh. You know what a dictator is? That's somebody that wasn't voted in, but he's there by force. And he's not there to please the people, but he's there and the people have to do what he says to do. They do as the dictator says. And a dictator by nature does not get voted out. It takes a great situation. As a matter of fact, to remove a dictator, it's going to take a lot of effort for you to overcome him. And so the same thing is true. The feelings of your life, and they're just natural feelings, and they're always going to be there, but they want to dictate how you're going to behave and how you're going to see the world. But it takes drastic measures to get rid of a dictator. And so what is it saying? Well, in other words, when you get stuff in traffic, what does the flesh tell you? Get upset, holler, get in a rage. We call this road rage. Isn't that right? And the dictator is saying, now, do it now. Or you get angry, be angry now. See, these are feelings. Paul said in Ephesians chapter 4 in verse 25 or 26, be angry but sin not. See, these are feelings, and we determine, or they will determine, how we're going to act and how we're going to behave. And so many of us, we follow the dictator. We're just like a good soldier. Whenever the feelings of the flesh tell us what to do, we're, yes, sir, and hop right to it, don't we? But if you take drastic measures, you're able to overcome the dictates of the flesh. As a matter of fact, the way we overcome, and countries that have dictators, generally it takes a lot of effort to oppress them and to get them out. It takes drastic measures. And in the same way now, the flesh wants to dictate your life. And I want to tell you how you overcome them. How do I overcome the dictates of the flesh? Well, real simple. You starve it out. How do you kill something? You quit feeding it. You see, whenever you get that urge to fly off the handle, but you resist it, you're starving it. You're patient and you're kind and you're nice. When you get the urge to compromise your morals, but yet you don't do that, you see, you're starving out that feeling of doing those things, and you're strengthening your resolve to do God's will. That's how we overcome. We starve the flesh, but we nourish. we nourish the rest of the spiritual body and the spirit itself. Paul said in Galatians 2 and verse 27 that I die daily. That every day, Paul is saying, I have to say no to the flesh. Every day, I have to take my feelings off the throne. You see, our feelings want to be in charge. In 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 27, Paul said that I buffet my body and I bring it under subjection each and every day. That is an ongoing process that occurs in our life. He also said in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 12, and this is a verse that we really need to take to heart. He said, everything is permissible to me, but not everything is expedient. You know what he's saying? He's saying, yeah, I can get mad. I can read somebody the riot act. I can compromise my morals. I can give in to those feelings and those urges and those desires that I have, but that's not going to be expedient for me. That's not going to be, as he says, profitable. Because when I live that kind of lifestyle, it's going to destroy a happy home. It's going to destroy relationships with people around me. It's going to rob me from the blessings that God has for me because, honestly, I'm just not mature enough to have them yet. You know, 5-year-olds don't get cars. Why? They're not mature enough for them. And spiritually, if I act like a 5-year-old, I'm going to get that very same thing. I'm going to get it held back from me. Now, our text in Galatians chapter 5 says that we are unspiritual when we're controlled by the ordinary impulses of life, these that we read just a moment ago. And it doesn't say that these ordinary impulses will go away. As a matter of fact, they're always going to be with us. But it's going to determine what we do with them. What are you going to do with those impulses? The next time you feel this ordinary impulse to fly off the handle, to be angry, to give somebody a piece of your mind, to be impatient with somebody in the checkout line, to compromise your morals, what are you going to do? You see, you can either give in to them and rob yourself of the blessings that God has for you, or else you can live a disciplined life and reap a bountiful spiritual harvest, a harvest of a good home, of respect, of being able to have peace and faith in your life. You see, you're going to reap those things. Paul told the young man Timothy, he told him a number of things, but one of the things that really stood out to me is he says that godliness is profitable. And I don't know about you, but I like profitable ventures, don't you? I like for things to work out. He says, but godliness is profitable to the life that now is and to that one which is to come. In other words, what we're talking about today, if you'll win this battle, it's not going to help you not only in life eternal, but it's going to help you here and the here and now. The here and now. This morning, are you giving in to the flesh? Are you letting the flesh dictate? Are you like a good soldier saluting and just going right along with it? But are you living that disciplined life looking for that bountiful harvest that is going to come? That's going to determine it. This morning, do you need to make things right with somebody? Or maybe this morning, you're not a child of God, and because of your faith in Jesus, you want to put your Lord on in baptism. I want to close with this thought that comes from an old song that is in our songbook, because it talks about there's a voice that we're going to listen to, the voice of the flesh or the voice of the Spirit. One of the two, we're going to listen to it. And that song suggests in its first voice, the voice of the Savior says, come. The cross where He died is in sight. Even now at the cross there is room. Won't you come to Jesus this morning as we stand and sing?